So for the last couple of months, I've been listening to interviews where fighters are complaining about not receiving their fight purses, or I'm going to say total money, right after the fight. And I'm seeing a lot of outlets, and some with agendas, some that don't have them, run with the narratives and run with the notion that Premier Boxing Champions is somehow conducting shady business without actually doing a research on how pay-per-view money is allocated and the whole process that goes along. Now, I understand that dudes want their money right away, but with certain business models, that's just not, it's just not realistic. And I remember listening to this old Paul Heyman interview, and I found an excerpt from it that pay-per-view money isn't distributed right away. And I'm going to play this, so this will give you some insight to, number one, some games that the pay-per-view companies play, and number two, that you actually have to wait for this money. So here's the clip.
Afternoon, half hour every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The economics of doing that show was so not viable to stay on the air that I knew we would fold 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 14 weeks down the road if we even attempted to do the strip show. They would not give us a slot on Fox that I could play into, satisfy the licenses, satisfy some advertisers, and keep the company afloat. What it boiled down to was, end of the day, distribution. We had no distribution. So it didn't matter if you had a product or not, or even if we had the financing, which we didn't because the pay-per-view companies held back our money. When we went into bankruptcy, this is something that is a very funny, well, it's not a funny story, it's a kind of a sad story, but when we went into bankruptcy, we were owed $2.8 million by the pay-per-view companies. And they wouldn't even give us 10% of our money, because they literally, and I'll call him out on this, the executive vice president of In Demand was a guy by the name of Dan York. And Dan York said to me, once you get distribution, we'll give you your money. We owe you $2.8 million. But if you don't get distribution, we know you're going down. And it's going to be cheaper for us to pay pennies on the dollar to a bankruptcy trustee than to just give you money now and bet that you'll be around in 6 months.
Wow.
And the day that conversation happened, which was when Mindy Herman was going to leave In Demand to go back to running the E! Network, so she couldn't help us. And Brian Ricco, who was a huge ally of ours, was overpowered by Dan York, because Dan York was the one guy that outranked Brian Ricco. So no one could stop this tyrant. And he had just done the same thing to Bob Arum, but Bob Arum had enough finances to take them to federal court and sue them, right, and get his money and then settle on a new distribution deal for pay-per-view. Had we gotten enough distribution, we would have stayed in business and redefined the company. The fact that we couldn't get distribution makes me the schmuck, the bad businessman that everybody points to this day, even though, if you consider this, even though we were owed $2.8 million, the total debt of the company was $7 million, 4 of which was my family's investment in the business. And then again, if we had gotten that 2.8, that could have carried us for years. Still, the company went down $7 million in the hole, and that was the end. We were bankrupt. TNA has lost that much in a month many, many times. That